From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Mayers from WisPolitics.com here with a special edition of our Capital Chats podcast. We're talking about the Democratic National Convention that just concluded in Chicago. I have with me an all-star panel of reporters who were on the scene. So I have Stan Milam of the Janesville Gazette. I have Grace Segers of the New Republic. I have Ruth Conniff of the Wisconsin Examiner. So, welcome everybody. Hi, Jeff.
Hey there.
Okay, let's just start with last night. Did Kamala Harris accomplish her mission? Ruth, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think the whole convention pretty much accomplished the Harris-Walz mission, which was really energizing the base and making a case that they are this new, exciting, joyful phenomenon, and that the Trump-Vance ticket is old news. And I went down to the convention Tuesday, stopping in Milwaukee when Harris and Vance came up to do their rally at the Pfizer Forum during the
You mean
nominating
Harris and
season.
Walz?
What did I say?
Vance.
Oh, sorry.
So that would have been a news story anyway.
That would have been. Yeah, Harrison Walz. I mean, they were dunking on Trump and Vance by going to Pfizer and filling it with what the campaign said was 18,000 people. At the same time, they were filling the United Center in Chicago, an obvious dig at a crowd size obsessed presidential candidate. And, I think that they really did show that they have a lot of momentum and there's a lot of enthusiasm. And so coming out of the convention, it's too soon to say if they have a bump in the polls. They have moved up into, the margin of error above instead of below Trump, where Biden was, especially in swing states like Wisconsin. So, I think that they did pull off a convention. It was not Chicago 1968. There was not this hugely disruptive protest presence. There was a feeling of energy and unity. You saw last night from the stage, Republicans like Adam Kitzinger endorsing Harris. So they were really making the case that they're the future and that people are, more interested in embracing a more positive, optimistic message, their message versus, Trump's prophecies of doom. And I think they made a pretty good case for that at the convention. And I think it showed momentum.
Okay, Grace, what's your take? You're not covering it from the Wisconsin point of view, but more from the broad national point of view. What's your take on whether it was mission accomplished for Kamala Harris?
I think honestly, Kamala Harris, if she had had an okay week, it would have been mission accomplished. But she had a very good week, which is not just what she needed, but definitely something that she can now look forward to. I think this is such an interesting convention because it's very different from what we expected to see just a little over a month ago. If this convention had been held the week of, say, the Republican National Convention in mid-July, I don't think we would have seen the fervor, the excitement, the ear-splitting crowd chants that we got this week. There was a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm. And if the purpose of the week, as for every convention, was simply to rally the faithful, she would have succeeded without doing very much. But being able to really buoy the spirits of everyone who attended, plus being able to make the case to average Americans, I think she mostly accomplished that. There were definitely some protesters outside of the arena, the members of the uncommitted movement who had really hoped to see a Palestinian American speaker on stage were disappointed. But I think that ultimately the message of the week was one of unity, and the Democrats came out looking stronger than certainly the Republicans did at the end of their convention, but also then they would have had Biden still been at the top ticket.
Yeah, I thought that her speech was an attempt to project, to be presidential or to look presidential. I mean, I think she was attempted some serious policy things, especially on the foreign policy front, which I thought I wasn't quite expecting that, but I don't know. Matt Smith, WISN, what do you think?
Yeah, I was on the convention floor when all of this played out last night. And listen, there were several moments when I kept thinking, what would have this been like if it was Joe Biden on the stage Thursday night as opposed to Monday night? When the balloons came down, I mean, it was absolute chaos. And that's what the party wanted. And that's what the party needed to move forward. And Jeff, to your point, I thought it was fascinating too, what she talked about, right? Like she knew the national audience watching at home. Not only was she trying to reintroduce herself to the country, but she talks about immigration. She promised to bring back the bill that died in Congress. She talked head on about Israel and Palestine. And there were a faint few chants when she talked about that, but nothing like what they were preparing for. DNC officials, the Harris campaign, were preparing for the potential. Like, what if some protests broke out in the convention hall any day or at any point in the weekend, and that didn't happen? The unity message, I think, rang loud and clear, and everybody in that room was on and ready to rock and roll. And they acknowledged, the delegates I talked to, not only from Wisconsin, but other swing states, that there's less than 80 days left. I don't think they're under the illusion that this is going to be easy, especially in Wisconsin. But they are now hoping to harness this energy and bring it to the grassroots effort. Whether that works or not, we'll find out in less than 80 days, right?
Mm. So, this week I talked to Roman Fritz, who was the one person who voted present in the Wisconsin delegation, and he was, with the pro-Palestinian movement. But he was clear in our conversation that he would still vote for Harris, and that he would never try to interrupt. So I guess he was a Wisconsin nice Palestinian protester. So, I think that's sort of, maybe that's emblematic of why the protest didn't spiral out of control. Maybe there was this trying to not interfere with Harris too much. I don't know. Let me go to Stan now. Stan, what do you think? Was it mission accomplished for the Democrats this week?
Oh, I would agree that mission was accomplished. I look at things as a skeptic usually, and I think the goal was to not screw anything up, especially in Harris's speech. And she hit all her marks on that. I think it was significant when she talked about her upbringing and she talked about her mother. And these are basic core issues. And I think people want to hear about that. What drives her? What motivates her? And she hit that nail right on the head. Gave it a personal feel, and that was very important in my estimation. She talked about how her mother told her to hang in there and get tough, and that inspired her. She talked about her friend Wanda. I think that was moving and touching. And those are the things that I think resonate with people who don't spend their entire lives getting deep into the politics like we do. And those things resonate with the people in the audience who are there as advocates for the party. And she gave them reasons to go out there and plant yard signs and knock on doors.
I think that's a really good point by Stan, that, most of the convention, 3 days of the convention are about, let's get Democrats on board. You have Tim Walz introducing himself, but mostly it's preaching to the faithful. The 4th night of the convention, you could really see how Harris was trying to appeal to middle America, if you will. And you saw that with the emphasis on Democratic veteran lawmakers, former CIA Director Leon Panetta, people chanting USA, people referencing Ronald Reagan, and then Harris herself making the case that she wanted to be the president for all Americans. She had that specific quote about the pride and privilege of being an American. And that's very overtly patriotic language that speaks to not just the Democrats, but also saying to those few independents that still exist, or people who may be on the margins, we hear you. I'm not weird. I'm not extreme. I'm a normal American. Look at all these people chanting USA. I can connect with you. And
and then there was Adam Kinzinger saying, speaking again. It's a lot of that messaging was to the people outside the arena who were watching on TV, but saying to his fellow conservatives, hey, I got some news for you. They're just as patriotic as we are. So I'm wondering about, Matt, what you think. I mean, sometimes I was struck by like, wow, is this irrational exuberance on the part of Democrats? The Republicans came out of their convention on speaking like, they were going to sweep the House and the Senate and all that. And now Democrats have high hopes. Is it irrational exuberance?
Well, listen, I mean, I think 5 weeks ago, the enthusiasm was in the bottom of the basement. It was so low, right? They were watching the Republican convention and what was coming out of Milwaukee. And then all of a sudden, literally overnight, there was this massive shift. So I think party leaders have told me, delegates have told me, I mean, they have been riding high now for almost 5 weeks. They've seen the bump in the polls, and this was kind of the culmination of President Biden saying farewell on Monday night and this becoming Kamala Harris's Democratic Party. And whether that lasts or not is the big question. And to everything everyone just said about rural Wisconsin, rural America, the independent voters, the 10, 20, 30,000 that are going to decide it in Wisconsin, how does this translate? Were people at home watching last night and throughout the week? Did they see clips on social media? Are they engaged in this? And what impact is Tim Walz talking about hunting and Kamala Harris talking about everything she did? What impact does that have on the voters that they need to sway?
Okay, Ruth, you mentioned to me that you came down specifically to one of your things you wanted to do was see Walz give his acceptance speech. And try to answer what Matt is saying. Is that going to have an effect in Wisconsin with a Republican-leaning voter or an independent voter outstate?
I think absolutely. I think that Tim Walz, the power of Tim Walz, and it has been part of this transformative trend, excuse me, that Matt's describing in the campaign. It's not just this big sudden drop in age and an increase in energy with Harris replacing Biden. It's also, I mean, she could not have picked a better running mate if they made one in a lab. Tim Walz is really, I mean, he's so charming, and people, find his kind of exuberance, which is, I think not irrational. It's just, he is genuinely joyful. I think people really are drawn to that, but particularly in the upper Midwest. I mean, when Walz says, that we in Wisconsin and people in Minnesota have a lot in common, I think that that is true. And, I've spent a lot of time talking to dairy farmers in Wisconsin who are generally Republicans and voted for Donald Trump, many of them twice, but who employ a large number of undocumented immigrants because 70% of the labor in the Wisconsin dairy industry is performed by undocumented immigrants. So there are a lot of rural Midwestern voters who are not really convinced that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance represent them. And that is the whole Trump-Vance pitch, is that they're about the quote-unquote real Americans. And Walz goes right at that. And he says a venture capitalist and a real estate mogul are not the authentic representatives of ordinary Midwestern folks. And then he has this whole pitch about neighborliness, community spiritedness, and, and not going back. And I think that is a real danger to Vance and Trump. And I think you can see that they have not figured out how to deal with it yet. So Vance came to Milwaukee and Kenosha to talk about how immigrants are driving crime, although crime has been down since Trump left office. And, just more of the negative messaging. A reporter asked him, what makes you happy? What gives you joy? And Vance said, stupid questions from reporters. Like, they can't seem to pivot out of this very negative, dark kind of mode. And I think that is a real problem for them, because I think that Walz has a lot of appeal, and I think it's authentic appeal, and it's very much rooted, as it happens, in some critical swing states here in the upper Midwest.
Yeah, and for a lot of Western Wisconsin, they're in the Twin Cities media market, and they might think Tim Walz is their governor, not Tony Evers, and they root for the Twins and not for the Brewers. Dan,
The
what
other thing
about
is, like, with the cultural stuff, when he says the golden rule is mind your own damn business,
Yeah,
that is a truly resonant thing to say in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan. Like, that is a real value. And people are not with the party of attacking single cat ladies and, following women across the border to make sure they don't have an abortion. Like, I think he's really onto something there.
Jeff,
Dan, what about it? Are Democrats engaged in irrational exuberance?
oh, I believe they are. But if I could just get back to Tim Walz for a moment, I'm sensitive to veterans issues. And you talk about negative messaging and criticism of him being in the National Guard and retiring after 20-some years. I think that people need to know about what it is like to be in service in the National Guard. When you're in the National Guard, you are available to be called anywhere into anything. It could be to help a community that is suffering from a flood. It could be to go into battle in a foreign country against people who want to kill you and people who know how to kill you. When you're in the National Guard, you are on call for all of that. So to minimize Tim Walz's service in the National Guard is a complete misunderstanding of what his service means and his service meant. And I'm very sensitive to that. And I think people ought to know that as a master sergeant, people like me, Private Milam, would shiver in the presence of a master sergeant. And people need to know that his service was truly meaningful, and it was truly appreciated by those of us who understand what military service means.
Yeah, Stan is a Vietnam vet for all you listeners. Okay, Stan, why did you say that Democrats are engaged in irrational exuberance?
Well, I'm not sure it's irrational.
Okay.
I go back to some of the things that I've heard. Let's talk about Ben Wickler for a minute. I think, first of all, he just did an extraordinary job of putting together what could have been meaningless, boring breakfast every morning that we had to get up and go to. He made those just stupendous opportunities to hear from key Democrats all over the country. But in one of my discussions with him, I said, is all of this excitement and exuberance, is that going to send a false message that maybe Harris has this already wrapped up? And he said, absolutely not. He said, and one of his thoughts really struck with me. He said, look, in any election, I would rather win by a landslide than a hair's breadth. However, winning is what's important. This is going to be a close race, but I'm going to just say, win, baby, win. And I think he brings a certain rationality to all of this. Everybody's excited, everybody's exuberant, but leaders such as Ben Wickles will bring them all back down to earth and say, listen, this is a serious fight and it's going to be close. Get out there, plant yard signs, make phone calls, uh, uh, be engaged, and turn that exuberance into the core work that needs to be done. So I would not call it irrational exuberance. I would call it a call to arms.
Okay. Grace Segers from the New Republic. I'm wondering about, we had in Wisconsin, one of the breakfasts, Greta Neubauer, the Assembly Minority Leader, saying for the first time, sounding optimistic about taking over the Assembly under new maps. And I'm wondering, what do you think is the down ballot effect of having Harrison Walz at the top of the ticket here? I think Democrats were despondent across the country and, but now they're talking about congressional races and, winning the state assembly in Wisconsin. And, is that going on in other states that you've seen?
Yeah, I think both on the state legislature level and on the congressional level. So most of my time is spent in the halls of the Capitol building in DC covering Congress. And I can tell you that, again, just over a month ago, particularly after the assassination attempt on former President Trump, congressional Democrats were thinking, oh, we're not just losing the Senate, we're not going to capture the House. And up until that point, Democrats had been pretty bullish about taking the House. They only need to flip 4 seats. And they thought, hey, maybe we can do this. Keeping the Senate, that's more of a hard sell, but maybe we can take the House. After President Biden's debate performance, there was a real sense of despair among members of Congress and concerns about losing the House entirely, losing Senate, Trump getting elected, and then having another Republican trifecta like there was in 2017. Since Harris has gotten to the top of the ticket, that has really changed. You heard Hakeem Jeffries, the current minority leader, saying, I think we can take the House. Chuck Schumer, the Senate majority leader, usually pretty optimistic, but he's really insisting that they're going to keep the Senate, which again is a bit of a difficult sell. But I'm hearing it, I've heard it in Wisconsin about your state legislature, but I'm also hearing about newfound enthusiasm in other swing states. So specifically Arizona, there's a lot of Democratic enthusiasm around their state legislature. And I think looking with Tim Walz, looking at what Minnesota accomplished in 2023 with their Democratic trifecta, a lot of state legislatures in other states that may have a Democratic governor but a Republican state legislature, such as Arizona, are now saying, hey, this is what we can accomplish. Look at what Minnesota did if you give us the power that we need. So I think that it's not just having Harris at the top of the ticket, it's also Walz bringing attention to what was accomplished in Minnesota. But there's definitely enthusiasm now that did not exist a month and a half ago. It's total 180 turn from absolute despair, we're going to have a Republican trifecta, to, hey, maybe we can actually hold on to this thing.
Okay, Ruth Conniff, what about the down ballot effects? What are you feeling? What are you hearing?
Well, I would add to what Grace said that specific to Wisconsin, the Democrats were already gaining momentum because of the change in our voting map. So I mean, we were the most gerrymandered state in the country, and we now have fair maps that really reflect the 50-50 partisan divide among voters. So Democrats, especially with Wickler, who, as Stan said, is, an extremely energetic Democratic Party leader, opening 47 field offices and then running candidates in all of these districts where Democrats didn't used to even compete. That momentum was already there. And Wickler used to make the claim that that was going to carry Biden, which was a little bit of a stretch, but that the down ballot races were going to push the top of the ballot over the finish line. Now you have this symbiosis in Wisconsin. So I think the energy that you see in the Democratic race nationwide is magnified in Wisconsin because you already had this energized Democratic Party that was competing, running candidates and getting excited about the prospect of getting out from under gerrymandering and, really potentially having some power. And the goal was hopefully to flip the assembly, not to flip the Senate, but to get closer and to have, a real conversation where even, the Republican candidates in safe Republican districts, they have to talk to everybody because the margins are just not so great. So there's sort of a potential policy shift where it's not just fear of a primary opponent, but really talking to a broader base of voters and moving more towards the Democrats. So I think what you see now is this really, excited idea that Wisconsin could look like Michigan looked in 2018, where all of a sudden you saw, everything turning over and there's a real potential there. And that's, I think that is something that has built over time and that in Wisconsin, it was the shift in the maps that really pushed us forward. And the Harris Wells ticket just really adds fuel to that.
Right. So, yeah, to your point, I just want to add this number. The Assembly Democrats are running candidates in 97 of 99 districts. I haven't heard, though, the Senate Minority Leader Hesselbein predicting that they're going to grab the Senate this time. It seems like at least a two-cycle operation. Matt, what about the down ballot effects? What are you hearing? What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, I think when you look to the Assembly and the Senate, and more so the Assembly, Jeff, as you just mentioned, I mean, this is the first true test of how good local Democrats are at recruiting candidates and who these candidates are and what the operations on the ground look like. They had some of the candidates at the convention. They were meeting people. They were trying to do media. So there's this really concerted effort to be out there like they have not before, especially in some of these assembly districts that they now think they can win. And that true test is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. When you look broadly down ballot, like at the Senate race, I mean, 5-6 weeks ago, Tammy Baldwin was nowhere to be found alongside Joe Biden, wanted nothing to do with that. And now she is front and center with the Harris campaign. She spoke on Thursday night. She's seen good numbers in the polls. So I think when you look at the congressional races and the Senate races, there is now this much stronger partnership between top of the ticket and the Senate race, where before the question was, can Tammy Baldwin help Joe Biden at all? And can that correlate and translate? Where now I think it's flipped, that potentially the top of the ticket will potentially help Baldwin even more. I mean, the polling shows, yes, you're still going to have potentially some Trump Baldwin voters, but can that change? And can she capitalize on that more?
Right. So the first target on congressional side for Democrats still appears to be Derek Van Orden, the freshman Republican in the 3rd congressional district along the Mississippi. What have you been hearing about the 1st congressional district? That's the one you're in, Peter Barca versus incumbent Brian Stile. Is there much chatter about a breakthrough by Barca with the new ticket?
There is a lot of chatter about it, Jeff. Brian Stile filled the shoes of Paul Ryan, and in the beginning, his first term, very much like the original Paul Ryan, someone who would not be bombastic, who would listen to all points of view and would be congenial. However, Brian Stile has embraced Donald Trump, especially on issues like the border. And then Peter Barker comes along, and for the first time, Democrats in the 1st congressional district have a viable candidate, especially someone from the eastern part of the district, Kenosha. Peter Barker is an institution in Kenosha and to some degree in Racine, where Republicans had made considerable inroads. So now the Democrats in the 1st congressional district are saying, this is a great opportunity. We have a viable candidate, a well-known candidate, especially in the all-important eastern portion of the district, and we have top-of-the-ticket assistance. I wanted to just mention regarding the top-of-the-ticket influence, we heard Representative Jamie Raskin from Maryland talk to one of the morning breakfasts for the Wisconsin delegation at the convention. And I think he encapsulated what is happening with Republicans and the chaos caused by Biden dropping out and Harris coming on immediately and so strong. And he said, Vance was once a never-Trumper, and now he's Trump's running mate. I can't wait to hear the two Vances debate each other. And to put a finer point on that, and Jeff, I think you could speak to this the best. I had the opportunity to meet and hear up close Ray LaHood at that event that you participated in. And Ray LaHood is considered the epitome of an Illinois Republican, true blue in a deep blue state. He carries the Republican torch until now. And to hear Ray LaHood say that Trump has to be stopped, and the only way to stop him is to vote for Kamala Harris, I think shocked a lot of people. And so I believe that there is going to be some down ballot effect of this, but you were there. You heard Ray LaHood. What did you come away with?
Are you trying to take over this show, Stan? I asked the question, man.
Oh,
Okay, anyway, Ray LaHood, yeah, he's an institution. His son happens to be a congressman, a sitting Republican congressman. So, yeah, Ray LaHood basically he says, my party has left me, and Trump, it's a cult following, and, he has to be stopped. Stan was quoting him correctly. Yeah, we did an event in association with the Paul Simon Institute at Southern Illinois University. The video will be soon at our site at WisPolitics.com in our convention corridor page. Had to get in that plug. Okay, we're almost out of time here. I want to talk about the RFK Jr. development. He seems on the verge of dropping out, seems on the verge of endorsing Trump. So will it matter? Let's go down. Let's do a round robin here and just say how much will it matter? How much will the RFK episode matter? Grace.
Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but if this were happening a month and a half ago, it would matter. But since Harris has taken the top of the ticket, RFK has been earning a far smaller percentage of likely voters in many polls. And yeah, it's still within the margin of error, but I think it's going to matter a lot less than if Biden were still at the top of the ticket.
Okay, Matt Smith.
Yeah, agree with that. But then you also look at Wisconsin, for example, and if he were to get 1%, 2%, 3%, that's race shifting. So where those voters go, we'll be curious. But yeah, I think less impact now than it would have been 6 weeks ago, and the polls have been reflecting that.
Okay, Ruth Conniff.
Well, even before Biden dropped out, RFK was pulling more from Trump voters than from Democratic voters. So there's a real question about who it hurts if his name is on the ballot in Wisconsin, even if he drops out, which is the question that's being decided by the Elections Commission right now. His name could be there. He could have dropped out, and some people might vote for him. But again, as Matt said, 20,000 votes swing elections in Wisconsin, so everything matters. There's no such thing as a non-factor here, but I think that factor actually might be slightly disadvantageous for Trump.
Okay, Stan Milam, you have the last word.
I think some people were worried that occasional voters would just go in the voting booth and say, oh, there's a Kennedy on the ballot. I'm voting for Kennedy. I remember Jack Kennedy. I think that has diminished greatly with the Harris-Walz ticket. I think it will not be a factor. And I agree that if it does pull away from somebody, I think it would pull away from Trump.
Okay, everybody. Well, I want to thank you for being part of this. Grace Segers from the New Republic, Stan Milam from the Janesville Gazette, Ruth Conniff from the Wisconsin Examiner, and Matt Smith from WISN TV and our partner program UpFront on Sundays. You should tune in on Sundays. You can also, as I say, see WisPolitics coverage at our convention corridor page. And so I thank you for joining us for this special edition of Capitol Chats, brought to you by Spectrum. I forgot the sponsor earlier. But so this is Jeff Mayers signing off, and we'll see you next time.